So in previous video, we learned about the static scoping and dynamic scoping principles. And for static scoping, we have seen an example also, like this example we have seen, in which it is said that an explicit save statement can be used to override the rule. That is the um, that is the lifetime of a variable depends on the single execution of the subroutine. So in this, the explicit save statement will be like the variable it is being declared using the keyword that is static. So same thing in algol, if it is represented means it will be declared using the keyword on. So this saved variable, it means the variables that is declared using the keywords static and on based on the languages. Okay, so in this language or in this program, what it is being done, a buffer, a pointer to the buffer is being declared, and this S, it will be storing some literals L and L0, L1, like that it goes on. Okay, so this N, it is being declared as a static variable and is being saved till the, and the scope of the variable N, it depends on the execution of that subroutine. So this N is being bound when n is bound, n variable is being bound when the subroutine is being invoked, and it retains its binding till the execution, till it finishes the execution of the subroutine. So once once the subroutine starts its execution, the name will be name to variable binding will be it starts that binding. Okay, name to variable binding will be there till that time, till the subroutine it starts its execution. That binding will be in an inactive state. Okay, so when the main program it executes, at that time the binding will be in an inactive state, and it gets active when the variable it is, when the subroutine it begins its execution. Okay, so this is what here it is being explained. The compiler creates a single object that retains its value from one invocation of the subroutine to the next. So compiler will be creating some object and that value will be retained. So when this label name is being invoked, what happens? It will be creating its own objects, like some variables in its scope it will be creating, and when it switches to some other scope, some other subroutines, its own variables and its scope will be defined, and at that time what happens? This n variable, it will be n variable and its binding, it remains in an inactive state. Okay, so that is what it is being explained over here. So we can see some examples related to static and dynamic scoping. So what thing you have to keep in mind is static scoping is static will be like it is fixed during the compile time itself, and from the program, that is from the text itself, you will be able to determine the static scope or the static binding. You will be able to understand. In case of dynamic scoping, what does that mean? It depends on the flow of execution of the program that is done during the runtime. That is the main thing you have to keep in mind. So here you can see one example. So n is an integer that is being declared. So it is considered to be as a global declaration. Also here there are two procedures, first and second. Okay, two procedures are being defined, and then the main procedure is having these statements. N is equal to 2. N is equal to 2. If read of integer greater than 0, call the second function, else call the first function. Then write integer of n. So that will be another one function which will be giving the argument as n. So from this, how you will be determining the static scope binding of the variables, how it is being determined. Okay, so in case of static scoping, it means it doesn't check the flow of control of the statements. So n globally it is being there. This n, it will be retained throughout the execution of the program. Okay, and this n, first inside this first procedure, n is equal to 1. It means that no specific declaration is being specified here, which means that it is accessing the global variable. Okay, so when first this procedure first is being invoked, it will be accessing the global variable and assigning the value 1 to that global variable n. Okay, so this is what happens during the static scoping. Okay, in procedure second, here a declaration is being done, n integer. So in that case, a local declaration is being done inside the second procedure. So inside the second procedure, if any modification is being done, means on that variable, means that it is accessing the local variable n during the static scoping. In here, n is equal to 2. Okay, this n variable, it determines what? It is accessing which variable? It is the local variable or the global variable? It is accessing the global variable. Okay, any if read of integer greater than 0, second of, okay, so here right of integer also, right of integer of n, in that case also what happens? The global variable n, it will be accessing. Okay, now what you have to do is, what you have to try is, during the static scoping, what is the value you will be getting for the, that is right of integer. This will be considered to be as the display statement. Okay, display statement. So what will be the value displayed during the static scoping? What is the value of n obtained during the static scoping? So here n will be considered to be as the global n value. So here we can just see how it executes. So n is equal to 2, starts with n is equal to 2, which means that the global variable n, it is being global variable n is being modified, and it is having the value currently as 2. And local variable n, it is over here, isn't it? That is inside the second procedure. And if read of integer greater than 0, so is some value, if it is read greater than 0, let's see here that second of function is being invoked. Okay, so if second function is being invoked, what it does, n is declared as an integer variable, that is local declaration is being done, local n is being declared, that is for the second procedure. Okay, and then first of function is being called. Okay, first function will be called. So in first function, n is equal to 1. It is assigning the n value as 1. So in case of static scoping, what it does, it will be accessing the global variable. So here global variable n value 2 will be made as 1. N is equal to 2 will be replaced with n is equal to 1. And now again, returning back to the calling program, no more statements in second, and returning back to the main program, right integer of n, it displays what value? That is the global variable n will be displayed, and that value is 1. Hence the value that will be displayed will be 1, that is of a global variable. Okay, so static scope rules require that the reference resolve to the closest lexically enclosing declaration, namely the global n. So based on the syntax and based on the text that is being closed, that is being lexically closed, which means in case of this first procedure, it can access the global variable n. In case of second procedure, it can access the local variable n. And in case of the main program also, it will be main procedure, it will be accessing the global variable n. Okay. So this is a case with static scoping. In case of dynamic scoping, in case of dynamic scoping, it will be following the flow of the statements, flow of execution of the statements that is done during the runtime. So runtime execution it does. Okay. So first n value will be equal to, so it starts from the main program, n is equal to 2. So if the second function is being invoked, what happens? Second procedure will be called and it declares a local variable n, and then it local variable n is being declared, and then it calls the first function, isn't it? First function is being called. In this case, first function n is equal to 1 will be done. N is equal to 1 will be done. So here if n is equal to 1 is being executed, which variable it will be accessing, whether the local variable or the whether the global variable or the local variable. So in this case, in case of dynamic scoping, it will be accessing the local variable that is recently accessed variable. That is, second procedure it has invoked, and second procedure has declared one variable n, and that variable it gets accessed. Okay, so n will be modifying the local variable initialized by the second procedure. Okay, so based on the invocation, the variable will be accessed, and that is the case with dynamic scoping. So here also this local variable n, it gets modified as 1, and it will be, and when when it returns back to the calling program and when it executes this write integer of n, what happens? The recently accessed variable, that is the local variable of second, will be displayed. Sorry, that is here if this write of integer, if it is written inside this second procedure. Okay, this write of integer of n, if it is written within this second procedure, then you can see that it will be printing the value n is equal to 1, because first of function will be making second procedure, it calls the first function, and that first procedure it is assigning the local variable n to 1 inside the second procedure. It is calling the first procedure, so this first procedure will be accessing the local variable of the calling function. Okay, in case of dynamic scoping. And in case of the main procedure, when you see, what happens is write of integer of n. So in this case, this n, it will be accessing the global variable only. Okay, so in this case, write of integer, if it is outside the procedure 2, it is currently outside the procedure 2, isn't it? Procedure second, it is outside that procedure second, which is a part of the, which is a statement written in the main procedure. So in that case, n will be accessing the global variable this n. So the output of this integer will be based on the execution statement read of integer. So if the read of integer is greater than 0, then the second function will compute, and that second function will be displaying the result as n is equal to 1. And if the read of integer reads some value that is less than 0, then first function will be executed. First function will be, what it does, it will be taking the value as 1, and it will be accessing the global variable in that case, and that global variable gets displayed over here. When declared, global variable gets the value as 1, Isn't it? Global variable is having the value 1 after calling this first function. But in case of the second function, when it is being